you participating today. We really value these sessions and the opportunity to connect with you all. My name is Anne-Marie Johnson and I'm the Southern Inland Queensland Regional Manager for AgForce, and I'm based out of Roma. I'm joined here today by our presenters, Dr. Heather Channon from National Feral Pig Management Coordinator, Zena Ronnfeldt, Dalby Producer and Queensland Representative, and National Action Plan Implementation Committee, and our AgForce Policy, Mari Vitelli. As I said, if you're having problems with your internet, please turn your video off. Please ensure that you remain muted throughout the webinar unless you're asking questions. After each of the presenters' presentations, I'll give you the opportunity to ask questions. Alternatively, feel free to type in the chat box at any time if you have any questions, and I will bring those up for you. So now to our presenters, I'd firstly like to introduce Dr. Heather Channon. Welcome. So you just need to unmute yourself, Heather.
Doing that now.
You got it.
So can you see my screen? Can you see my
Not
screen?
Yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Can you see
we
it
can
now?
see it now.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. And firstly, thank you to AgForce for inviting both Zena and myself to talk about feral pigs today and the National Feral Pig Action Plan as part of your webinar series. So just very briefly, I commenced in this role as National Feral Pig Management Coordinator in March 2020, and I'm leading the 3.5-year program that's funded by the Commonwealth and being managed through Australian Pork Limited. So the program was initiated back in November 2019 in response to the ongoing threat of African swine fever entering into Australia and the devastating impacts this could cause to the Australian pork industry. As well as this is also in recognition of the need to act to better control our feral pig populations. So now what's happened to my screen? Oh, hang on. Okay, so there were 4 key objectives to for the program. The first of these is to facilitate national coordination of feral pig management, surveillance and control activities, raising awareness of feral pig issues, engaging with stakeholders through ongoing communications and engagement activities, and to drive effective and sustained investment to support on-ground actions by land managers. So feral pigs cause significant losses across many agricultural sectors, with impacts including crop and pasture damage, livestock predation, land degradation, spreading of weeds, soil erosion and runoff, contamination and damage to water points. And they're in addition to all the biosecurity risks from the transmission of exotic diseases, including foot and mouth disease and African swine fever, endemic diseases and zoonotic diseases to other livestock, plants and also to humans, and leptospirosis and brucellosis are examples of these. And the disease impacts from feral pigs are often hidden. They also impact on the environment, cultural values and social assets through threats on ecosystems, biodiversity, water quality, land degradation and spreading of weeds and diseases. So managing feral pigs is very challenging and mentally straining to you all and can be overwhelming due to the time, effort and cost to maintain consistent control efforts. So last year, as part of the development of the action plan, we conducted a stakeholder survey to which 776 people responded. So these results for the land managers who had access to this question, we had 441 people respond to this question, and you can see here that the key impacts reported by land managers were land degradation, crop and or pasture damage, and biosecurity threats and disease transmission. So how big is the problem? Feral pigs cause many impacts on up to 45% of Australia's landmass. And this figure that was produced in 2014 by DAF Queensland reflects the abundant and widespread distribution of feral pigs, particularly in the far north. The Australian Bureau of Agricultural Economics and Sciences, or ABARES, are currently, and as well as CSIRO, are currently working to update the national population density and distribution maps. So hopefully this information will be available next year. Unfortunately, we don't have a good understanding of how many pigs are present in different areas. And this lack of information does present us with lots of challenges. And so we do need better data to inform local programs, to improve the effectiveness of control programs, and also to better manage the impact of feral pigs. For the costs of damage, and I'm sure you've heard this many times before, but to agriculture alone were estimated back in 2002 to be in excess of $100 million per year. I think this is a gross underestimation of the agricultural damage caused by feral pigs. More recently, ABARES have released preliminary estimates of total yearly expenditure by agricultural landowners for feral pigs, and this figure is around $48 million per year. Both of these bits of information are also in the process of being updated by ABARES, so hopefully in the next year or two we'll have more updated information there that's really demonstrating the impacts that feral pigs have. So this plan is the first national strategy that's ever been put in place to reduce the impacts from feral pigs in Australia. It's still going through an endorsement process with jurisdictions through the National Biosecurity Committee. Hopefully this will come through next week. It has been a slow process. But overall, the plan has a 10-year ambitious vision. And this is reflective of the long time frames that are required to reduce feral pig populations and their impacts, as well as, of course, the challenges and the enormity of the task ahead. So the plan is aiming to shift feral pig management from being reactive, ad hoc and quite fragmented to being more coordinated, proactive and strategic, as well as collaborative. And the best approach to do this, because of their mobility and reproductive rate, is for people to work together in coordinated management groups at a landscape level. Their home ranges can also extend across a range of different land holdings. And this is what's meant by landscape scale or cross-tenure approaches for feral pig management. But landholders working together is challenging. And interestingly, from the ABARES Pest and Weeds survey that was released earlier last year, only 8% of landholders were members of a pest, animal or weed management group. So we do have a lot of work to do here as well. But overall, for the plan to be successful, we want and need to work closely with all those involved in feral pig management on the ground to increase the adoption of integrated best practice management, how to best apply them to optimise their success, and to encourage people to work together and build their capability and skill-based and networks of management groups to enable all of this to happen. So the vision of the plan is to deliver long-term suppression of feral pig populations or eradication where that's feasible, and that is happening in some places, including Kangaroo Island in South Australia, and also in Moreton Island. And this is being done to reduce their impacts to Australia's agricultural industries, to the environment, to our social assets, as well as to cultural values. And the plan, if you're wanting to have a look at it, is on our website, and the link is on the bottom of this slide. Well, we're going to do this by guiding and supporting land managers to apply effective, coordinated and sustained best practice management of feral pigs. So it's really looking at long-term delivery. And there are three strategic goals in the plan. The first one is looking at effective leadership, coordinated partnerships and strong governance. The next one's looking at community engagement and education. And this is where, of course, we need to maintain our social licence to operate. So we need to make sure that we're building community awareness through the communication activities that we're undertaking here as well, and also increasing skills and knowledge and land managers here within this goal. Goal 3, as I like to refer to it, is where the action is. So this is where we're wanting to support land managers to work together on the ground to really make the difference that's needed. We're wanting to do this helping them here by developing and applying existing and new approaches, technologies, resources and data management systems, as well as science-based knowledge to help with improving and enhancing the effectiveness of these control programs. So while we're waiting for the plan to be formally endorsed, we're getting on with implementing the plan. And we have put in place a governance structure, and that's now being bedded down, which is great. So our implementation committee, that's being independently chaired by Ricky Archer, who's the CEO of NAILSMA, or the North Australian Indigenous Land and Sea Management Alliance. It's been meeting around about every 6 weeks or so at the moment, and that commenced in late May 2021. Representatives from across a range of stakeholders impacted by feral pigs are on this committee, and these were selected through a formal expressions of interest process. We've also formed a number of subcommittees or panels, and the Scientific Advisory Panel and the Indigenous Advisory Panel have now met, and we're also in the process of getting an Investment Advisory Panel set up to help us really to identify where those opportunities for longer term investment are, to make sure that we've got longevity in programs that are out there, because that of course is a key limitation in the effectiveness of programs. So those representatives on the implementation committee from Queensland, including Zena, who will speak after me, are highlighted on this slide. And if you're wanting more detail of who's involved, and as well as those in the panels, you can find that on our website, feralpigs.com.au. So an annual knockdown rate of at least 70% of the population is required to suppress populations and to keep them low. And that's pretty difficult, particularly when you don't really know how many pigs are out there in the first place. But if we don't do it, pigs will quickly recover in their populations in good seasons when water and feed availability are not constrained. And I'm very aware, of course, that's happening in many areas right now. So unfortunately too, the control is one that never ends and there's no off switch. So really keeping sustained pressure is what's really needed here. So the best practice methods used to control feral pigs are listed here on this slide in order of their effectiveness in reducing the population. And which of those you might be able to apply in your own area will vary, of course, due to differences in habitat, landscape type, location, and proximity to neighbours, as well as to towns, and of course, other factors. So importantly, they need to be used in combination with one another. And you can't rely on one method alone to control feral pigs. And right then you just saw that there is no silver bullet either. So unfortunately, yeah, there's the constant need to keep on it. And there is no really quick solution that I can provide you either. I could just say here that the only one of these methods that don't work is bounties, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So incentivizing pig control can make the problem worse. And this is a great case study that's been provided from activities and actions from Tennessee in the US. And it really demonstrates well how bounties didn't work in this example. So as you can see, prior to 1950 in the top figure, feral pigs were present in 8 counties. By 1988, this had spread to around 13 counties, the middle figure. An open season hunting program was then introduced, and over 24 years, feral pigs spread dramatically to many other counties in Tennessee. I want to now briefly talk about the cost of damage caused by feral pigs. And of course, deciding on how much to invest in feral pig management can be largely based on perceptions of economic significance of pig damage, risks that they can present, and the degree to which damage can be reduced by economically feasible and practical control measures. Interestingly, again, when we asked people in our stakeholder survey whether they estimated costs of damage, only 19% of land managers did, and I'm sure you've heard me say this before. Also, 68% of land managers told us that they don't collect any information or any other data on feral pigs. And if they do, it's largely around the numbers that are present. Oh, my slides are flicking without me asking. And this just means we've got an issue in terms of the types of data that's been collected and the value of it. But only a few studies have recently been conducted to determine the economic impacts of feral pigs, and I'll talk about them now. The first one of these is one that's been conducted by the Northwest Local Land Services in New South Wales, and they published findings of the cost-benefit analysis back in October 2020. I've given the link below in blue if you wanted to go and find the final report for that. It is on the website. So it was found that chickpeas, fava beans and sorghum had the highest levels of damage from feral pigs. And also 41% of livestock producers indicated that feral pigs predated on their lambs. The cost effectiveness of control programs and the methods that you can see there on the right-hand side of this slide was also determined, and the order here aligns with what I talked about earlier. Exclusion fencing is expensive to put up and is increasingly being used to protect high-value horticultural crops and also domestic pigs from feral pigs. But it doesn't reduce populations, it just shifts them. And also make sure if you have got exclusion fencing, you don't really need me to tell you this, but you've got to make sure you maintain them. Because if you don't, you might as well not have them there at all. And studies that have shown that feral pigs can cause more damage if the fence is damaged, if the fence is damaged than if it wasn't there at all. So yeah, being vigilant with maintenance of fencing and the costs around that is really critical. And the ground shooting part there in terms of expensiveness is just in terms of the time taken to control large numbers of pigs. So looking at the economic impacts, this slide provides you with a snapshot of the outcomes of the modelling that was done of net benefits from conducting feral pig control. And you can see here that the highest results were achieved when the modelling was done looking at above average enterprise yields, high avoided losses caused by feral pigs, high commodity prices, or a combination of these factors. And you can see on this slide that chickpeas had the highest potential net benefits of up to $100 per hectare. In this study, each control method was modelled independently. So it's therefore possible that if you're combining a combination of these control methods, you could deliver synergies in pig control and increase the overall effectiveness per hectare in pigs. So looking at the other study that's been done is looking at the Whitsunday Regional Council. And if you're wanting to find the copy of this final report, it's also on the feralpigs.com.au website in the information hub that I'll talk about shortly. If you look under Whitsundays, you'll find the final report there. But this was also interesting. This one was completed back of last year as well. And what you can see here is that across the three key agricultural sectors, feral pigs were estimated to cost around $7.5 million worth of damage every year. So again, when you're looking at that number before of $100 million a year, this is just out of this particular council area where this damage was being recorded. So you can see there that we do need an updated estimate. So much of this work is all around feral pigs. Around feral pigs is all about people and change or influencing practice change. Increasingly, technology is being applied to assist land managers with managing populations and to know how many are out there, how many there are, and where they move to increase the effectiveness of culling operations, as well as, of course, there's also work going on right now to find out how genetically related they are as well. So yeah, I just wanted to just point out the fact that there is a lot of technology now going into feral pigs. So many of you will no doubt have heard and know of Darren Marshall's work and how he's using GPS collars to track feral pig movements in the landscape over time, and really encouraging people to work more closely together at the local and regional level to manage the feral pig population. I think in all of this, it's making sure that we've got the what's in it for me for people to join groups and to be actively involved in them. This has also been quite useful because it is stopping the blame game and really understanding where the pigs are moving and making sure there's no that finger pointing that can otherwise occur isn't happening. So these outcomes can also then be used to inform targeted control programs and what methods to apply when and where. And I'll talk a bit about that shortly, because there is some data analysis that DAF Queensland are involved with right now. So looking at this slide, work that has been done as part of the National Environmental Science Program Resilient Landscapes Hub. So this work was done up in the Cape York, and they developed a dashboard that brought together all of the data that was collected into an easy to use platform for Indigenous rangers to use in Northern Australia. And this was done to help them have information at the ready to help protect their turtle nests from feral pigs, wild dogs and goannas. So I acknowledge that work in the use of this slide. But the point I want to make from this, though, is it does provide a great visual depiction of what's needed to make a control program effective. So you can see here that if you've only got, let's learn it again, if you've only got 15% of the population removed per year, the population of pigs increases from about 20,000 to 26,000 in a year. So you need to make sure, of course, that you're getting that target that I talked about before there. And the next slide actually shows that when I've clicked that. So you can see here that if you've got a 78% control of that population annually, you can get this estimated here that there'll be 118 pigs left in that area in 20 years' time. Yes, it's a slow process, but that's some of the modelling and the work that's been done, just to show here the effectiveness and what needs to happen to make sure that programs deliver on the outcomes. It's also here, of course, that some of the challenge with feral pig management is really having performance measures in place that are helping people to understand the impacts of the work that's been done on the outcomes and the values that you're trying to protect. And that's something that's being looked at as part of the plan. And we're working with that with the Scientific Advisory Panel to help with developing simple, quick and easy performance measures and how that information can be recorded to make sure, of course, that you've got informed programs and it's not going to be too time consuming and difficult to collect, and as well as that meaningful information. So I just thought I'd take a few minutes to run through some current work that's underway to control feral pigs in Queensland. The first of these, just as some information here, is that we launched an information hub on our website earlier this year. And this has been informed by the discussions that I've had since I started in this role and the people who I've met. Unfortunately, most of that's been virtual because of COVID. And one day I'll get out of lockdown in Melbourne to be able to meet many of you. I'm really looking forward to doing that. But anyway, with all of this, it's the purpose of this information hub is really to try and bring information together and really understand on the ground all of the work that's going on. And I recognise here that this is still very much a work in progress, because as we identify programs that are out there, we add them in. So if any of you have programs that aren't on the hub, please feel free to get in touch so that we can include them. Really look, yeah, that'd be terrific. Because this hub is not just about me, it's also about providing value and building networks of all the groups and all the work going on the ground so that we can all learn from one another and to share that information. You can see there that the background to the map is grey, and that's been done on purpose so that you can't track in and zoom in on an area. It's really where the dot's located, which is depending on who's leading that program. It really does mean then that it's really just trying to depict that work is happening without identifying particular areas so that we actually manage privacy issues and other issues around in the unauthorised trespassing that could potentially occur. So of course, we're also in the process of updating this hub. So if you hear from us, please assist us with providing your current information so that this tool can be as effective for you as possible. In the next lot of slides, I just want to thank Dr. Matthew Gentle and Cameron Wilson from DAF Queensland for providing these to me so I can provide you with an update of some of the work going on right now through the department to help support feral pigs. So the first one of these is that there's a new project that was announced a couple of weeks ago that's attracted Commonwealth funding as well as co-investment from the state. It's looking at enhancing feral pig management in Northern Australia. And they're looking to do that through validating this through a demonstration of optimised management. And this is similar to the approach that's being taken now through the plan in terms of having demonstration sites in place to refine and test optimised management and monitoring practices to really try and build and support people with the effectiveness of their control programs on the ground. So we're really looking forward to working more closely with DAF Queensland in this, because it's actually, as we're working with this, it's actually how we can work and support with all the programs on the ground. That's really what we're wanting to do. Another area of work that DAF is involved with is in conducting research to examine and improve baiting practices. So they're examining the use of non-target exclusions to deliver bait in North Queensland, wet tropics, and also the use of sodium nitrite or hog-on in the wet tropics and working with local governments in that area, really wanting to provide this as another tool, another option for control and management of feral pigs. DAF also conducted studies to support minor use permit applications for continued use of meat and fruit baiting required as the changes in supply of 1080 come into effect. And these were submitted in early 2021. And as I understand it, both permits are still being assessed by APVMA. And I'm sure that Mari will provide a bit more of an update if you're interested in that space at the end of this seminar. The next few slides will cover off on research that's being done. It's focused on African swine fever prevention and preparedness. So DAF Queensland undertaken research on aerial surveys using a helicopter with a thermal imager and video camera fitted, and they're comparing the results of these surveys to visual surveys using human observers. So surveys were flown in late May and early June this year in the Moonee Westmar district of southern Queensland. And this work was completed in conjunction with New South Wales DPI with Tanya Cox. So you can see here that this slide demonstrates the value of using thermal imaging to detect pigs and dense vegetation. On the left, thermal imaging may not provide significant benefit to improving the detection of pigs in open landscapes, while on the right, it could be of greater benefit. You'll be able to see pigs under that cover. And this similar type of approach is also what's being used right now on Kangaroo Island with much success, being able to detect pigs under cover, and it's also then helping to inform an aerial culling campaign, really to help with finishing off feral pigs and removing those last remnant pigs after large control operations. So this slide just shows the transects that were flown over the 4 sites surveyed in the Moonee Westmar districts. And so 10 to 20 transects were flown in each site with a total area surveyed of around 496 kilometres squared. So early results indicate that thermal surveys may offer comparable or greater precision to visual surveys, but this will need to be compared directly with concurrent visual survey data, and this is still ongoing. So I don't have any outcomes or results at this point, but it is looking favourable. And just further looking at the, I talked before about the work that Darren Marshall's been doing and fitting the GPS collars. So DAF Queensland are involved in analysing the data that Darren's been collecting, and this is being used to better understand home range size, habitat use, and areas for targeted control. So these data are providing greater opportunities to increase our understanding of pig movement ecology that can then be applied to significantly improve the management and monitoring of feral pigs. For example, for this particular pig that's been tracked here, we can see here that the pig is spending 50% of its time in the area highlighted in yellow on the bottom of the slide, and the other 50% in the orange area. If we can work out why it likes the yellow area, such as habitat type, or whether it's because of proximity to resources or similar, we could potentially save a huge amount of time and effort for only targeting areas that the pigs like to be in. So this is all the power of data. So if we can target just 8.8% of the area that the pigs are in, we could save 91% of the resources while still maintaining the opportunity of a pig encountering a bait. They've also been involved with looking at updating pig distribution maps. At the moment, they're very coarse, and so the DAF is working with CSIRO to refine models of feral pig habitat and to map this habitat for Queensland. And this will help to identify areas for control and management and for computer simulation modelling of disease spread and management. So monitoring and density estimation is also important to update information for modelling purposes. And this slide shows the draft maps of seasonal habitat suitability for feral pig breeding in Queensland for late dry season, the map on the left in orange and red, and the one on the right is for wet season, the one in purple. And so this habitat suitability has been mapped here from a scale between 0 and 100. And these maps will be continued to be refined and include, where it's possible, the learnings and the parameters of the pig movement analysis that's also being undertaken. So now just moving back to where we're going and where we're at with getting the plan implemented and actioned on the ground. We've got a number of immediate processes and priorities that we're working on at the moment. The main one of these is seeking to work with a number of existing management groups to evaluate different management strategies and monitoring methods at a range of demonstration sites across Australia. And we're just in the process there of finalising and working with those groups and contacting them to commence that. So we know that groups of land managers have invaluable experience in pest management in their regions, and we're wanting to work with those groups to identify the approaches that can be used by others on a wider scale and really helping to share that knowledge and information on the ground. We're also looking to increase the adoption of integrated best practice management by land managers, looking at developing appropriate performance measures to measure the outcomes of management programs and how that data is actually being collected and used and able to then be fed back into management programs to help with their effectiveness. We're also looking to develop best practice guidelines and templates for local management plans. That's also making sure we've got plans in place, because often we're very reactive when we see pigs out there. What are we actually doing, and is it part of a plan? Making sure there is that alignment from an individual farm or property level, and also then to management groups. We're also wanting to add value by attracting additional investment. So that's also really critical. And I talked before about the formation of the investment advisory panel. So finally, this is all about supporting people on the ground. And so we are striving to connect with our stakeholders in a number of different ways. And again, as I mentioned before, one day it'll be face-to-face when I can get out of Melbourne, at least for myself. And for Narelle, who's also joined us as our program support officer, who's located in Western Australia. There are a number of ways that we're engaging with our stakeholders, and this includes our dedicated website, a monthly newsletter. And if you want to subscribe, please get in touch, and you can do that via the website or sending us an email. We've got the information hub, and we're wanting to have, of course, making sure that's as useful to people as possible. And we also run stakeholder forums from time to time, and the next one of those will be on the 11th of October. And the purpose and the focus of this next one is really about management planning and tips and tricks for helping people on the ground to deliver their integrated best practice management. So just things to help with improving how things are done, and how that we can learn from other people in terms of what works and what doesn't. That's what the focus of the next one is, and we'll be sending out an email shortly to get registered, get people to register for that, so that we can get the webinar details to you. So again, it'll be an online event. So with all of that, thank you so much for your time, and I hope that this was worthwhile and useful to you in terms of the information that I've provided. And I just welcome anyone to get in touch with myself or Narelle at any time, and that's what we're here for. So please get in touch. And any questions when we finish this afternoon are welcome. And I look forward to ongoing engagement with you all. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. Now I'd just like to open it up. Should anyone have any questions, please simply unmute yourself or type it in the chat box and I can ask on your behalf if you like. Does anyone have any questions for Heather? You were obviously very informative, Heather.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Heather. If you do have any questions for Heather that you think of before the end of the presentation, that's fine. I'll open it up again at the end. So now I would like to welcome Zena Ronnfeldt. She's a Dalby producer and Queensland representative on the National Action Plan Implementation Committee. I'd just like to also remind everyone that this Zoom session is being recorded, so should you require a copy later on, don't hesitate to ask for a link. All right, welcome, Zena.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Can everyone see the screen I just put up? We're looking at it. Great. So my presentation's really short because Heather's already told you everything you need to know. No, just joking. I just got a few practical tips for any producers out there who are looking to organise their own aerial control shoot, or I guess any particular coordinated feral pig action, the very best place you can look is the PestSmart website, which is www.pestsmart.org.au, which is a federal government website, and it's got a lot of really great resources in it. It's worth just going to the landing page for feral pigs and reading the screens that they have available, because they provide a really good, concise summary of most of the things you need to know and most of the regulations that you will have to comply with. So on the left-hand side of the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a bit of a list there: plan, define your feral pig problem, develop your feral pig plan. So just with anything that you're planning, you've got to be specific in terms of what actually you want to do, how you're going to achieve it, how it's going to be relevant, and are you going to have time to do it. So then, you know, you go through to the management part of the screen. It actually goes through a model code of practice for the humane control of feral pigs, because whenever you're doing anything these days, unfortunately, there is things to be, paperwork to be done and things to be mindful of to make sure that you're complying with everything that you need to comply with. So this is actually really useful and very well written in that it's plain language, and you can just scroll through it and really hit on the things that, you know, are relevant to you. So just working further down that, if you're going through the different methods of how you're going to control these pigs, there's actually a matrix of the humaneness of the different control measures. There's also standard operating procedures on the different methods, and these are really important to have a look at, particularly in terms of the aerial shooting of feral pigs, because there's quite a degree of regulation in what must be complied with in terms of who you are using, what qualifications they have to have, what licenses and registrations they have to have. For example, you have to have registration with CASA to be able to discharge. I understand you have to have registration with CASA to be able to discharge a weapon in an aircraft, and that's not an exception for shooting pigs or anything else that's feral out of a helicopter. And also, I think you know, you have to check whether there's licensing endorsements needed on weapons licenses. So I guess the message in all of that is, when you're engaging a contractor to do anything, you need to check what their registrations are, if they're current, and if they have current insurance, you know, for what they're doing, just so that you can protect yourself. So there's also rules around animal welfare rules that are outlined in these standard operating procedures. And the great thing about them is that if you follow them, then that ticks a lot of your boxes off in terms of any complications that you might encounter, or, you know, it will help reduce liability. So just to look at the practical considerations when you're doing any control measure, you've got to look at what it's potentially going to cost you, and how you're potentially going to fund that, what contractors are available in your area, or what contractors can you source, what's their experience, what do you have to comply with for land access. So say, for example, in Queensland, my understanding is that you have to have permission of the landowner to be able to discharge a weapon on their land. So you're going to have to make sure, if you've got a group involved, that you have the permission of all the landholders that the helicopter will be shooting over, you know, so that you can comply with those rules. What is going to be your communication mechanism prior to, during, and after the control shoot? What's your level of community involvement? How are you going to keep them informed? How are you going to keep the momentum going by distributing the information and keeping the community engaged? What insurance do you need? Like, a lot of people don't think about the fact that they need to contact their insurer, their farm insurer, because it can be as simple as things like if you have the helicopter based on your property and it's got a land, then will your insurance policy cover you if something happens to the contractor's helicopter in the landing area. So they might have insurance for everything they're doing, but you know, you need to check whether you need a landing areas endorsement, for example, to be able to have aircraft landing on your property. A lot of people who are getting livestock mustering done by helicopter will have that anyway, but just something to be aware of. Pest management plan and biosecurity plan, you can have, certainly need to have your, you know, your feral pest management plan updated if you have one, to include your aerial control measures, and that sort of all feeds into your biosecurity plan. And your pest management plan doesn't have to be a complex document. You know, it can be as simple as you like. And the PestSmart.org.au website actually gives you guidance on just some basic things you need to record. And I think AgForce has got some guidance on that Maria will be able to help you about. Risk management plan is often something that's been forgotten, and it's actually just a really basic document that you can do yourself. Just identify your risks, just identify what you're going to do about them, and a lot of that will be covered by, you know, I understand from my understanding, just making sure you're using the proper licensed contractors, and also following the standard operating procedures in that PIG 002 document that the PestSmart people have produced. So just really simple things so that you know, you can protect your own situation and also comply with all the rules. Animal welfare, that PIG 002 document gives you what you need to know there. And just like things to think about, say, for example, if you're shooting from a helicopter, sometimes there's really litters of very tiny pigs. You're going to have to make sure that everyone involved in the shoot is able to then, in a very timely fashion, go and deal with like any remaining piglets that may be there. You know, if the sow is dispatched by the helicopter, and just those little things can make all the difference in terms of having a successful shoot and having a shoot that is successful but ends up with some really bad feedback in media because there's been something untoward happen. Like if you have all your plans in place, you've done your risk management, you've got your pest management plan, you're maximise the protection from any adverse outcomes. You've got to think about how you're going to deal with landholder relations, and making sure everybody's quite educated on the outcomes that are expected out of the shoot, so that, you know, you might have a situation where you get the helicopter over and there really isn't very many pigs because you've done a very good control effort on the ground, and, you know, how you're going to manage people's expectations that are involved in the shoot so that, you know, everyone's happy about the success of it. And also, if you need to report on the outcomes of the shoot, say for example you have some public funding involved and you have to do some reporting on it, making sure that you have everything in place prior to actually running the shoot so that you're collecting the data that you need to be able to report that information. So that's just some practical consideration tips. You know, happy to take any questions, but otherwise I'll just hand you over to Marie, who can give you a bit of an update on you know, what AgForce might have available in terms of assistance with pest management plan, biosecurity plan, that sort of thing. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I just thought I might go back to Anne-Marie. So is there any questions for Zena before I just make a few comments at the end? Very quiet group. Thank you. Oh, thanks both Heather and Zena. I think, you know, you've brought so much together with that National Action Plan and also now the Implementation Committee, and being able to talk to Zena today. You know, she practices what she's talking about. She has coordinated a very successful feral pig group and from her region. So I've taken a screenshot of those key points because, yeah, very practical information. I suppose I just want to mention, I suppose, what go on from where Zena said, we, I suppose, promote a very practical farm biosecurity plan template developed by Gary Pigeon out at, used to be the biosecurity officer at Longreach. So it's good for pest pests, animal pests and weeds. Talks about, what you're trying to control, what you're using, the time of year for your pest animal control, which animals you're trying to control, the timing of your control, and ideally you do a property map of where you may be putting out baits or traps or you're doing your work. So we have got that and can share it. Also, just right now, the Biosecurity Committee within AgForce is working through developing a very succinct little streamlined, I suppose, farm biosecurity template with all little tips like these type of plans, information about adjusted livestock, dealing with coal seam gas, small miners, fossicas. We're trying to compile it all together. So that's going to be happening, I suppose, in the next few months, but it's a deliverable under the Biosecurity Committee. The other couple of things I just want to mention, AgForce has been, ever since the National Feral Pig Action Plan started and Heather started, we've been in there and trying to help with information and taking an interest in this whole development. And it was just great to see this get so far. My understanding, the actual plan's done. It's held up, once again, in these departments. The National Biosecurity Committee is going slow on getting that out. And then once they finish with it, it goes to Department of Ag and David Littleproud to release it formally. So I think we need to put a bit of a pressure at that top end to say, come on, get going and get this great plan out. And we just want to keep working that national coordination together. And it would be good to just know what everyone's doing. As you well know, feral pig control, everyone's doing little bits all over the place, but just trying to just have a network, especially doing that because feral pigs are mobile. Having that coordinated approach, and if ever we have an exotic disease outbreak through the feral pigs, such as African swine fever, we do need to pull together. We see it with COVID, we need to really pull together. So let's be prepared. I just want to mention briefly something, and we can most probably do a future info session, and we will be sending information out. There's a few changes with accessing like a baiting or 1080 concentrate for feral pig baits. We know aerial shooting works well, ground shooting works well, but at times baiting it's got its place. There's two changes that are kind of overlapping, and it's causing a little bit of confusion with a lot of producers, but also within local government and everywhere. First is, for many years, the Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, or DAF, has provided 1080 concentrate to the local government councils to be able to do their community baiting programs. They had a big stash put away, thinking one day we might have an exotic disease outbreak, and they had a special permit under the national regulator, APVMA, for that. That big stash has run out, or is about to run out after this spring baiting season. From now on, local government will be purchasing their 1080 concentrate through the suppliers such as PAC and ACTA, or any other suppliers. They're the main two we're aware of. So it's commercially available. It's not that expensive. I think it's $82 a litre, but then if you look at the fees and the actual transport costs to get it out safely, maybe about $165 a litre. It's the cost of all the consumables, the plastic bags, the gloves, the injector guns for the meat. That used to be provided by DAF to the local governments. Unfortunately now, local governments are going to have to foot that bill themselves. We know local governments are pretty resource poor. And so I suppose this transition, it's got a bit of angst and just how it will all happen. Most local governments will still continue doing community baiting programs. As to how the cost will be absorbed by councils, that's still in discussion, but that's still happening. The other change that's happening in Queensland, as of next Monday, we only received formal notification yesterday, the Queensland Medicine and Poisons Act takes effect. It's been written, it was written a few years, or a year or 2 years ago. COVID stalled its release, but the Act takes effect on Monday, and also associated regulations. One of those regulations is to do with poisons, such as Schedule 7 poisons, anything that can harm human health. And so our restricted Schedule 7 poisons, vertebrate poisons, fall under that. AgForce has been in consultation with the Department of Health for about 3 years on the Act and these regulations. It's been a long, hard process. So there's not too many adverse changes coming for producers, but what will happen, if you're doing a community baiting program, you basically continue as is, through the local government or the provider of those community baiting programs. If you're dealing with strychnine or PAP or 1080 concentrate, or strychnine and PAP, we'll talk about that, you must probably have to do 2 training competencies, your ag chemical usage and transport competencies, and have an approval through Department of Health, pretty similar to where you are now. If you want to get hold of 1080 concentrate yourself and inject your own baits, you can. You've got to become an approved person. There's a process for that. There's 3 competencies to do, the 2 general ag chem ones, and another one, which is the applied vertebrate baits in rural and environmental areas. And currently there's only a few registered training organisations offering that. Ballistic training is one, and we are negotiating with TAF Queensland whether they could provide that throughout Queensland. That's for anyone that wants to do their own baiting. Possibly applies to more the large corporate producers or people where there is not a community baiting program going in their area. So that's something that's happening there. We will now provide information to our producers of those changes about accessing those vertebrate poisons. There's been a bit of confusion with local government. They think, oh, landholders are going to get it direct, and there's going to be accidents happening with 1080 and accidental, mortality of off-target animals or pet dogs or whatever. No, I mean, there's still regulations to control the use of it. So it's just got to all be bedded down, and everyone's got to just know what's happening. But we'll be sending information that out to our producers. And if down the track, once everyone is more informed, if there's a need for a webinar or get together or local meetings, we can do that. So I'll stop there because we're over time, but just to give you a taster of things that are just happening and changing right now. Over.
Thank you, Mari. Does anyone have any questions for Mari at all? Just unmute yourself or put it in the chat box. Nope, no questions, that's no worries. All right, should anyone have any follow-up questions from today's webinar, please feel free to contact AgForce. I've put my contact details in the chat box there, as well as Mari's and Heather's. So thank you very much to Heather, Zena and Mari for presenting today. Just a reminder that this Zoom session was recorded, so there will be a link available should you like to obtain that link. But yeah, other than that, thank you all for attending tonight's Zoom meeting on the big plan to get rid of feral pigs. Hope everyone has a great night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.